You don't know, you damn well should know. My name is ragreynolds, and just before I get started responding to this video, I just want to say that there is nothing personal here. I'm not trying to attack Riley, because the last response video I made was to Riley as well, and I just want to make it perfectly clear that I have no problems or issues with Riley herself. I just disagree with a lot of her views, and I like her videos just give me something to bounce my opinions off. It gives me somewhere to, it helps me put mine forward. So without further ado, let's just jump right into this.
Well, I already know a bunch of people are going to come to this video just to give it a thumbs down and leave a nasty comment without even watching it.
Hold on. Okay, so thumbs down, nasty comment. There we go. Comment. Okay, back to the video.
So if you are one of those people, I would challenge you to actually try listening to what I have to say.
Okay, I will try. I promise you, I will try.
Basically, non-binary genders are real, but plenty of people out there still believe that they're not.
The reason that so many people do not believe that non-binary genders are real is because non-binary genders are not real.
Someone who has a non-binary gender is neither strictly a binary man or a binary woman. They might be somewhere in between, their gender might be more fluid, or they might reject the concept of gender entirely.
You know, you can't just reject the concept of gender. You can't just reject something because you don't feel like it's appropriate or you don't feel like it's real. I can't just reject the notion of gravity because I don't like gravity. I'm not just going to suddenly float off and gravity is no longer real. That isn't how things work. You can reject your gender all you like. You can reject the concept of gender all you like. That will not make you any less of a man or a woman.
Non-binary people fall under the umbrella term trans, which refers to anyone whose gender doesn't match what they were assigned at birth. So for example, a woman who was assigned male at birth would be a binary trans woman, but a non-binary person can also be assigned female at birth. The opposite of this is cis or cisgender, which would be someone who was assigned male at birth and identifies as a man. So when I use the term trans, I mean binary transgender people as well as non-binary people, really anyone who isn't cis. And people who try to say that this isn't a legitimate thing are just wrong.
You know, I think you could have structured what you just said a little better because I did have to listen to it a few times to actually understand what you were trying to get at. I mean, I do agree with you. You're completely correct in saying that trans means you do not currently match the gender that you were assigned at birth. See, the issue here is, I'm not even saying non-binary doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that non-binary genders do not exist. A gender is the state of being male or female. It's to do with how, and I know it's not the same as sex. Sex is if you have a penis or a vagina. Gender is in your mind, but gender is still male or female. And what I'm not understanding here is people keep talking about non-binary genders and respect them, but can you name a non-binary gender? No one is yet to name a non-binary gender to me. They say agender. And I say, well, agender isn't a gender. The whole point of agender is that you lack a gender. How can you lack a gender if your gender is agender? It doesn't make any sense at all. It's more of a description of a gender. Transgender is not a gender. The definition of transgender is not matching the gender you were assigned at birth. So that would mean that trans means that you were assigned man at birth, but you're actually a woman. You identify as a woman, or vice versa. So trans, again, that is a description of a gender. You could say gender fluid, but again, gender fluid would not be a gender. Gender fluid means that you switch between genders. You don't switch from being gender fluid to bigender to pangender. You switch between being male and female. So male and female are still the genders. Gender fluid is just a description of that gender. So you would be non-binary if you were gender fluid, and I'm not trying to argue against that. That's a completely irrelevant topic, whether I do believe these non-binary descriptions are real or not. That's something for a completely different video. But my point is, they're not genders. There are only two genders, male and female.
One professor in Toronto recently refused to acknowledge any of his non-binary students by their proper names or pronouns. He said that when people deviate from the norm, they shouldn't be welcomed with open arms, but tolerated without too much aggression. This is a university professor basically saying, you're lucky that your gender doesn't make me aggressive towards you. Ew.
You know, I completely agree with you here. That guy was totally in the wrong. Everyone deserves to be respected and accepted for who they are, what they identify as, and what they do believe in. The problem, though, is that you also have to remember that there are stuff like this on the opposite side. There are people who think that if you ever misgender them, then you're a shitlord and you're horrible and you deserve to die and all this other nonsense. Now, of course, not everyone's like that, but not everyone's like that professor you mentioned either. And there's issues coming from both sides there. There's a difference between someone who approaches some trans man and accidentally uses the wrong pronouns. They don't know any better. And the man says, okay, please just use these pronouns from now on. The person says, okay, I'll try and remember that. But there's a difference between that and if you accidentally misgender someone and they turn around and slap you in the face or start screaming at you for being a shitlord and you shouldn't be assuming people's genders or pronouns. And that's ridiculous because the percentage of trans people is so small in our population. There aren't that many trans people in the grand scheme of things. It's such a small minority of people. I've only ever met one openly trans person in my entire life. Nearly 20 years. And so I don't see why we should be not assuming people's genders because it's fine 99.9% of the time. There is no issue doing that. And it's an inconvenience if we start going out of our way to not misgender people for that 0.1% when you're probably never even going to be in the situation where it's appropriate.
And this guy isn't the only one. Most people who make response videos to mine can't seem to resist the temptation to throw in some ad hominem insults towards me, usually saying that my non-binary gender doesn't exist.
Well, I didn't do that in my previous response to you. And in this video, what is your non-binary gender? I don't know what it is. If you're saying your non-binary gender is because you're trans, then yeah, I accept the fact that you're trans. I acknowledge that transgender is a legit thing. But if you're trying to tell me that you have a non-binary gender that isn't male or female, then yes, I'm going to say that that's not real.
Other non-binary people face discrimination and prejudice every day as they try to navigate their lives in a world that assumes you have to be a man or a woman. Often, the main thing I hear people cite to deny our existence is science. They say that you either have male parts or female parts. As someone who genuinely loves science, it sucks to see people trying to use it to erase the existence of others, especially when there is plenty of science to suggest the opposite. So here are 3 steps to acknowledging the existence of non-binary people. Step number 1, recognize that sex and gender are not the same thing. Sex is not gender. Gender is not sex. If you can't accept this basic fact, then we're never going to agree on anything.
Let's agree. Sex and gender, different things. So first we have to define what these two terms are. So sex, it's to do with your genitals. It's based in biology and science. If you're a man, you have a penis. If you're a woman, you have a vagina. Some people will argue that intersex is also a sex. I would disagree. Intersex means that you have both sets of genitals. But if you do any research into that area of study, you will find that every intersex person, only one set of those actual genitals they have work. If they have a penis and a vagina, maybe only the penis will work. So what I'd say is that they're more of a man than a woman, so I'd say they're a man. But even if both sets did work, I don't think you would be a third sex. It would mean that you're a combination of being a man and a woman. It means you're a combination of 2 sexes. It does not mean that there is a mystical third sex that appears. I think for a third sex, you would need to somehow have a third set of genitals that have not been discovered yet, that isn't a penis or a vagina. So what is gender? So we've defined sex, so what is gender? Gender is, according to the dictionary anyway, it is the state of being male or female, but it's to do with cultural differences more so than biological ones. So according to the dictionary, it's still only male or female, which still backs up what I'm saying. So you can be a male or a female in regards to sex, and you can be male or female in regards to gender. And those two things, you can be either or for each of those two things, and they're not the same. So you can be a man as your sex and female as your gender, or vice versa.
Sex is biological and has to do with your anatomy and physiology, though I've done an entire video on why this also isn't a perfect binary, which I'll link to in the description. Gender, on the other hand, is a socially constructed set of cultural norms.
No, okay. Gender is not socially constructed. It's a ridiculous notion, and trying to say that gender is a social construct completely undermines the idea of transgender people in the first place. You cannot say that gender is a social construct whilst also fighting for trans people to be recognised and acknowledged. It doesn't make sense. The whole premise of being trans is that you are born with the wrong brain for your body. You are born with a male brain, but you're in a female body. You are born with a female brain, but you're in a male body. If you're saying that gender isn't real and it's made up, then how do you explain trans people? Because obviously there can't be a male or a female brain, can there? And if there isn't a male or a female brain, they can't exactly feel like the opposite gender in their head. You can't have it both ways.
These general definitions are not made-up Tumblr fantasies.
Yes, they are.
Even the Merriam-Webster Dictionary and the Oxford English Dictionary say that gender is more about cultural factors than biological ones.
You know, you go on to speak about how there are an infinite amount of sexes and genders. Meanwhile, you're citing the dictionary here as proof that gender and sex are different things, but you're leaving out the part in the dictionary that specifically says that gender is the state of being male or female.
Step number 2, recognize that it's normal for gender and assigned sex not to match.
Okay, I will acknowledge that gender and sex not matching happens. What I will not acknowledge is that it is normal. You see, what normal means, normal is to do with how most people act, how most people are, what most people are. Being straight is normal. Being gay is abnormal. Now, normal is not a negative word. You don't need to look at this as negative. I'm not saying being gay is bad. But the majority of people are straight. You come into contact with someone, the chances are they're going to be straight rather than gay. That means that being straight is the norm. Just like how, for example, not being vegetarian is the norm. Being vegetarian is abnormal because there aren't as many people who are vegetarian. So the same goes here. Most people you come into contact with, most people in the world, their gender and their sex matches. That means that being cisgendered, as you call it, is normal. If you do not have a gender that matches your sex or whatever, that is abnormal. It is not normal. Normal is what the majority of people are. It is what is most common. And being trans or non-binary is not normal.
There is an infinite set of sexes and an infinite set of genders, and they can combine in any way.
This is the most ridiculous statement that you make in this video. The gender part isn't as ridiculous as the sex part. The sex part truly baffles me. I've heard the gender argument before about there's an infinite amount, and I can almost understand that, although it's still not right. But the sex part, an infinite amount of sexes? Sex is biological. We've already established this. You established this. We talked about this already. Sex is if you have a penis or a vagina. It's your genitals. How can there be an infinite number? There are not an infinite number of different kinds of genitals. There are not infinite numbers of different human anatomies. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Step number 3, recognize that people can identify outside of the binary. Alright, this last step is admittedly the hardest for a lot of people. I've even met binary trans people who deny the existence of non-binary people. But the thing is, if you can recognize that gender is just this arbitrary social construct that's not based in biology...
You see, gender is not a social construct though. That's the problem with your argument. It's not. You can take things from animals from the animal kingdom, and you will see that there are differences between how male and female animals act. The males they tend to be more aggressive, they tend to be more violent. The females are more caring. You can take young children who have not been given any sort of education about gender or had any stereotypes put on them. You can take these young children, and most of the time, young boys will take blue and fire trucks and action men over pink and dolls and anything else that we deem feminine. And the same goes for females. Young female children are far more likely to go for pinks, to go for Barbie dolls. And that's just the way things are. These aren't things that are just taught. Sure, they are things that are maybe further solidified by us encouraging them to have those. I'm not going to argue with that. But there is a basic biological instinct that makes boys go for blues and be more aggressive, and makes girls go for pinks and be more caring. Obviously, there's exceptions to both of these rules, but you can't deny that there is basis in science for this sort of stuff.
And you can recognize that people don't have to identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, then why can't they identify with a gender that's not strictly man or woman?
Because there is a tremendous difference between not identifying with the gender you were assigned at birth or identifying as a completely made-up gender. You can't just identify as whatever you feel like identifying as. You are male or you are female. You can't just say, oh, I'm a unicorn. It doesn't work like that.
And it doesn't hurt you or inconvenience you in any way to respect someone else's self-identification.
It would be a bit of a stretch to say that it could harm you, but as I mentioned earlier, it can inconvenience you if you have someone who is screaming at you for misgendering them when you didn't know any better. That is an inconvenience. It is an inconvenience if people can't just go up to people and say, how are you, miss? How are you, sir? Without having to fear being attacked over that. These are things that are inconveniences. But I will certainly agree with you that everyone does deserve to have their identity respected. Everyone should be accepted for who they are and who they identify as.
Once you've gone through all of these steps, congratulations! You can now recognize the existence of non-binary people. If you're still not convinced that non-binary genders are real, I genuinely want to know, what would it take for you to change your mind?
Name one.
What about you? What problematic things have you said or done in the past?
What could I have possibly said?